Welcome to episode 51 of the Becoming MindStrong podcast. We are officially kicking off season 5. Man, it feels like yesterday that I put out our very first podcast episode with no idea what I was doing. And here we are in season 5. So I put out a lot of polls on Facebook, on Instagram, and I asked people what they want to hear more about in the podcast. And I keep these polls pretty niche down in terms of, do you want workouts? Do you want nutrition? Do you want mindset? And every single time I've ever put out a poll, mindset has not only won, but it has won by a mile. And that's not really surprising because the work we do inside of my company, inside of MindStrong Fitness, the coaches and I, we kind of giggle to ourselves because we're like, yeah, people think they're here for the weight loss. But for us as coaches, the weight loss is the simple part. Simple doesn't always mean easy, but weight loss is math and science. Like, of course, come to us, we'll help you lose weight. For us, that's a given. We know that what really counts is what's under the surface. There is a reason why we got into this relationship with food. And that reason's very different for different people, right? For some, it's deeper and it's trauma and it's what's modeled as a kid or in past relationships. And for others, it's more about the way that they've approached nutrition most of their life and the way it's been wired in their brains. And for a lot of people, it's a combination of both. So I say that to say it's not surprising that mindset is the topic that most want to hear about because it is the root of all this. Right? Health and fitness and nutrition and workouts and everything in that category. It's not about the logistics. If it were simply about the logistics, we live in a world of technology. We could go on YouTube, we could go Google things, and we could have it solved by tomorrow. The reason it doesn't work like that is because there's something deeper under the surface. And we're going to devote a lot of season 5 to those mindset topics. There's other things I want to talk about this season that we will dig into when it comes to more logistical things. But I think mindset is such an important one because they say you don't know what you don't know, right? And there's no way for us to say, well, I'm struggling with this because of X, Y, and Z, unless we've done this work. So we're going to kick off season 5 right now with episode 51, talking about fixed versus growth mindset. Check it out. If you haven't read the book Mindset by Carol Dweck, 10 out of 10 recommend. It's a very popular book, especially in the field of education. If you have kids in school, if you know anything about the education system, there's kind of this push-pull going on, kind of a battle in the education world where modern education, we're going to go off on a bit of a rant right now. Modern education is very, I'll give you my honest opinion, it's set in the Stone Age, right? Why are we making kids regurgitate facts when we live in a world where Google is in their pocket and they could pull it out and get the answers right then? And the opposing team, if you want to call it that, they understand this. They say this is not the society in which we live. Why are we still teaching that way, right? We need to be talking about bigger conversations. We need to be talking about creativity and problem solving and just developing our minds and our strategy skills, which clearly by how I just described that, which end of the spectrum I live in. Fun fact, actually, before I started MindStrong, when I transitioned out of being a teacher, I thought my next profession would be in educational reform because I feel very passionately about this topic. Unfortunately, what I learned is that to be in educational reform, what you're actually getting into is politics. And I had less than zero desire to get into the world of politics because it is a deep, dark hole of money and conspiracies and all the things that go on. And unfortunately, education's tied into that from the little bit that I dip my toe in that water. But I digress. On this topic of this push-pull, this, one side wanting to stay old school, the other side wanting to get into this more broad approach. One of the big conversations is based around Carol Dweck's book called Mindset. And in Mindset, she breaks the way that we think down into 2 broad categories. One is called a fixed mindset. One is called a growth mindset. Fixed mindset is what we tend to call here the all-in, all-out mindset. It's very black, white, right, wrong. And if you've read my book, if you've hung out here before, that's very much how I was raised. I was raised in a very, very black or white family. You do, you don't, right? In my book, I talk about my dad's favorite expression growing up about softball was you touch, you catch. If the tip of your glove can touch that ball, there's no reason you don't catch it. And that kind of thinking has its perks. You tend to be a very driven person, a big go-getter. And what I didn't realize till I got older is there are a tremendous amount of downsides to that. When you're living in the black, white, all in, all out, do or don't mindset, we tend to not even try things that we either A, think we won't be good at, or B, experience has shown us we're not good at, right? We've tried it and we failed at it and we don't want to fail because that's our self identity. So why would I do that again? Or if there's even an inkling of I might not be good at it, that's my self identity. Why would I do that again? So fixed mindsets show up a lot in the education system. It obviously, because we learn that way in school, many of us grew up to be adults that think that way. We put labels on ourselves like, I'm just not a math person. I'm just not good at music. I wasn't born with that gene. And if you've hung out with us before and you understand or are beginning to understand how the human brain works, how neuroscience works, we know that that's complete BS, right? Yes, you might not have been born into a family where math is talked about like with ease. It's not just like a topic of conversation that it's a given we're good at math. And genetically, maybe you weren't born to be a mathematical genius. And knowing what we know about neural connections, about neuroscience, it is complete BS to say I'm just not a math person because the brain works in a certain way. We learn something new, we form a neural connection. We repeat it over and over and over again. And that stuff called myelin forms the neural connection, which turns it into a habit. So saying, well, I'm just not a math person. Well, yeah, because someone probably told you that when you were a kid, or math was your least strong subject, and you just wired in that belief, and myelin's coded it for years, years, years. So you stopped trying. Had we gone the other way, right? Had we been born with this belief, I'm great at math, your brain would have been searching for data for that to be true. And you would have practiced. The myelin would have been coded. Boom, you would have been labeled a math person. So I use that as an example to say this is a very fixed mindset that we tend to see in schools, we tend to see as adults. I'm either good at something or I'm not. I'm either this kind of person or I'm not. The other side of the spectrum is what's called a growth mindset. A growth mindset is how we learn best. That is capital T truth, whether we're talking about kids or adults. This is where we learn to talk to ourselves, to others as teachers, as parents, by saying things like, man, like algebra was way harder than math was last year. This is super fascinating. You know what? I bet if I get some help, maybe I sit down with my best friend, maybe I get a tutor. I bet if I sit down with someone who's really clear at teaching, I could think about this from a different perspective. I could dig in a little bit and I could get better and better at this. A growth mindset understands it's not all or nothing. It's not, well, I sucked at it the first time, so I'm going to suck at it for life. A growth mindset is understanding exactly what the name implies, growth, that there's a journey to this, that the more we practice, the more we look at other approaches to things, the more apt we are to stick with it, to get better at it, and to wire in that new neural connection. So why are we talking about growth and fixed mindset when this is supposed to be a health and fitness podcast? The answer is when it comes to weight loss, when it comes to our health, when it comes to our nutrition, when it comes to our workouts, most of us approach this in a very fixed mindset way, and we don't even realize we're doing it, right? We might be the first ones to say to our kids or our best friends, this is brand new. Of course you don't get it yet. We just started this yesterday. Let's dig in. Let's find a solution, right? We will be their best cheerleader. But when it comes to the conversation of, let's say, weight loss in general, our mind goes to, I've tried and failed more times than I can count, right? Every time I start a workout technique or routine, I never stick with it. It's never going to last for me. I'm just not a person who does cardio. I'm laughing at that one because that was mine for a long time. We put these black or white labels on ourselves, and then we're determined to protect them come hell or high water. And the kicker to this is we don't often notice we're doing it, right? Sometimes just realizing, wait a second, I have a growth mindset. I am the encouraging cheerleader for everyone else in my life, and maybe even for myself on different topics. But on this topic, I tend to go towards a fixed mindset. I'm all in or all out with my diet, right? I'm either a gym person or I'm not. I'm either a cardio person or I'm not. I'm either a plus size person or who is that thin person? That's not my self identity. And sometimes simply red flagging these thoughts, right? This starts to get into a bigger mindset conversation. We've done episodes in the past where we talk about talking to yourself like a kindergartner. We talk a lot about the all in, all out mindset. We talk about red flagging our thoughts and retraining our brain to be our best coach. This is where all that stuff starts to come into play. Because when we can red flag that thought and say, whoa, hello, fixed mindset, like that was a very labeling thing I just put on myself. I'm not a person who works out. Says who? Because someone said that to me when I was 11, because I started a workout routine in my 20s and I didn't stick with it. So I've spent the next 20 years wiring in that belief. Is this capital T truth? Or is this just how my brain is wired right now? And the reason this becomes so important, I mean, there's a, a multitude of reasons this becomes so important. But the ones that I want to focus on right now, first and foremost, is this. When you say to your brain, this is just how it is, why in the world would your brain keep looking for answers, right? If you are saying to your brain, I can't do this, well, there's nothing else to talk about. You've already told it, stop the search party. There's nothing else to do. It is impossible. So of course your brain's going to stop, right? I can't stick with a workout routine. I'm not a person who works out. Cool. Good night. Mic drop. Like we've just determined there's nothing else to do. That's a very fixed mindset way of thinking. When we can transition to, wait a second. Yeah, I've tried working out before and it's never stuck. That doesn't mean that I'm not someone who can work out. That's a label I put on myself. I decided that when I was 20, and now I've spent 20 years wiring in that belief, because we know a belief is simply a thought we've played on repeat till it's wired in our brain to feel like truth. Rewind that and listen to it again if you need to. That's all it is, right? I've just wired into my brain that this label fits, and it's not capital T truth. So what if, and now we can go back to some of our older episodes, what if I do the bare minimum? What if I close my eyes and take a deep breath and feel into the bare minimum I can commit to, do that bare minimum, throw myself an internal party, let momentum play its role? Well, guess what happens now? 3 weeks, 6 months from now, we look back and guess what we are? We're suddenly a person who works out. So was that first label capital T truth? Absolutely not. But when we were going through life saying it's black or white, it's fixed mindset, this is how it is, of course our brain shuts down, right? That's kind of a bigger conversation when, when there's a coaching program you want to join and your brain says, I can't afford it. Well, cool. Good night. Like that's the end of this conversation. When you switch that to how can I afford it? Now our brain kicks into action. That how, this isn't woo-woo rainbows and glitter. That how becomes, there's an answer out there. I need to find it. Maybe I have to get creative. Maybe I have to think outside the box, but it exists in the universe, in the multitude of universes. There is a solution to be found. And that conversation can be had about all of this, whether we're talking about nutrition, whether we're talking about workouts, whether we're talking about how you speak to yourself internally. It's not just, I'm not a workout person. It's not just, well, I've tried tracking my food and I can't stick with it. It's not just, well, I'm just a raging jerk to myself internally. That's how I am. There is no such thing as that's just how I am. That is just about the most fixed mindset thing you can say. That's just how I am is the biggest cop-out that people will use to stay stuck for their entire lives. That's just how I am is the definition of fixed mindset. I was born this way. This is how I am. There's no changing it. And that, my friends, from the bottom of my soul, is complete and utter BS. Because when you understand how neural connections work, when you understand how brain wirings work, and if you don't understand them, go back and listen to older episodes of this podcast, there's zero truth to that. The you that exists right now is 100% a result of how your brain's been wired over the past 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And that can be changed. It doesn't happen overnight. It's time, consistency, and patience, and it can be changed. So for now, what I'm going to challenge you to do for the next few weeks, all this mindset stuff, it's not a switch that we flick. It's not just, oh, I learned about growth mindset today. So boom, there it goes. It's red flagging. Like, oh, interesting. I didn't even notice I was putting that label on myself, right? Is this capital T truth or is this a label that I decided? Oh, there's that fixed mindset creeping and interesting that I think that. Then once we've done that, I don't even suggest reworking it yet. Just spend a couple of days red flagging it. You'll be shocked how often it's happening. Then the next step is we can get to work a little bit, right? So I've decided that I can't track food because history has shown, right? My caveman brain is looking for proof. History has shown that I'm good for about a week and then I fall off the wagon. Is that capital T truth? Is it a fact of life that I am physically incapable of sticking to a plan where I track my food? Or is it possible that that's just what history has shown, that my brain has been wired to believe that maybe last time I was being super black, white, all in, all out about this. And maybe what I need this time is a softer approach. Maybe I need a coach. Maybe I need an accountability buddy. Maybe there's another way of looking at this that will show that it's not so black and white. It's not so fixed. There's room for growth here. There's room for improvement. There's room for baby steps. When you start to approach every area of your life from a place of growth mindset instead of fixed, this is how we step into our power. We could get into a whole conversation about perfectionism, right? Perfectionism and fixed mindset are best friends. They go hand in hand. It's a fear of judgment. Go back and listen to the episode about perfectionism. When you learn to live in this gray, and I laugh saying this because I was the most black and white person you'll ever meet growing up. And it was a theme when I started doing the work. It was a theme of my life. I would repeat, learn to live in the gray, learn to live in the gray. And I hated it. It was so uncomfortable. It fought against everything I believed I was. But when you can learn to live in that gray, to live in the mess, to have things a bit out of order up here in your head, this is where growth happens. This is where you can step into your power because you can take those risks. You can face fear. You can learn to be your best coach and coach yourself through the tough times. As long as you are living in a fixed mindset, you are living in a fixed world. I'm going to say that again. As long as you are living in a fixed mindset, you are living in a fixed world. You cannot grow. You cannot bust out of your comfort zone because doing anything outside of what you know you can accomplish will conflict with your self-identity. If you want to truly level up your life, of course, here we're talking about nutrition, workouts, mindset, but it's bigger than that. It's taking risks in your job. It's taking risks in your relationships. If you want to do that stuff, it is a necessary part of life to learn to live in that gray, to start stepping into that growth mindset. For more on MindStrong Fitness and how to work with us, visit www.mindstrongfitness.com.